Once you get to a certain level of importance, particularly in public service, it's sort of hard to disappear. You have perks like bodyguards paid to keep track of you and keep you safe. And, of course, there's the omnipresent media horde, which makes its living knowing where you are and what you're doing and saying. All of that makes the disappearance of Governor Mark Sanford extra weird. Mark Sanford's the governor of South Carolina. He's been famous recently for standing up for his principles by refusing $700 million in federal stimulus money to help out the desperate schools in his state. But according to reporting from the South Carolina newspaper The State, Governor Sanford has had no contact with his staff or his security detail since he was seen last Thursday leaving the governor's mansion in a big black SUV. Even the lieutenant governor, who's supposed to be in charge while the governor's away, was left in the dark.
I haven't talked to him, and his office hasn't contacted me.
The governor's wife has also said she doesn't know where her husband is, though it should be noted she doesn't seem particularly worried about his AWOL status or the fact that he missed Father's Day with his 4 young children. The governor's wife told the Associated Press, quote, "He was writing something and wanted some space to get away from the kids." The governor's office has issued a statement saying that Governor Sanford was just taking some time away from the office to recharge after the legislative session. It has been a rough few weeks for him. The Republican-controlled legislature overturned all 10 of the governor's vetoes, and the state Supreme Court forced him to accept that stimulus money he gained national attention for refusing. Also, apparently, this is not the first time the good governor has gone AWOL. A spokesman for Mr. Sanford told NBC News, quote, "After the session winds down, it's not uncommon for him to go out of pocket for a few days at a time to clear his head." Well, early today, an official from the lieutenant governor's office said that Sanford's office told them he had been reached and he's fine. Weirdly, later on in the day, Sanford's spokesman refused to confirm that anyone has actually spoken to him or seen him since Thursday. Authorities do say that a signal from his mobile phone was located on Thursday near Atlanta, Georgia, which is not at all where he lives, and which is a frankly pretty weird way to have to find your governor. Joining us now is John O'Connor, a political reporter for the State newspaper. Mr. O'Connor, thanks very much for being here.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
So tonight the governor's office said they'd spoken to Governor Sanford, but then they backtracked from that. What's the latest on this, as best as you can tell?
Yeah, this has been changing all afternoon. What they've said very clearly now is that the governor's spokesman, who's very involved in how the office is run, has not spoken to the governor since Thursday. He could not say whether any other staff has spoken to the governor since Thursday. And we know that law enforcement has said that they have lost track of the governor and did so Thursday. And they don't know where he is either.
Is the spokesman betraying any concern about not knowing the governor's whereabouts, or is it the position of the office that they know where he is and they're just not going to tell anyone?
Yeah, what they said is when he left Thursday, he told them where he was going, that he would be difficult to reach, and that he would be checking in from time to time, but that it would be difficult to get a hold of him in between those times when he checked in with them. The spokesman said they know where he is, that he is healthy, but that they could not say that they've spoken to him since Thursday.
Who is in charge when the governor's unreachable? I mean, it's one thing for the governor to plan to check in at his own volition, but if something happened in the state that he didn't know about, that they needed to let him know about as chief executive, if he hadn't given over power to the lieutenant governor, who would be in charge?
The South Carolina law is a little unclear on this. The Constitution says very clearly that if there's an emergency and the governor is unavailable, that the lieutenant governor has the authority to take on some of that executive authority. What happens is if the governor is, if it's not an emergency or what constitutes an emergency, it's unclear. It's also unclear if the governor has the ability to appoint a representative to handle some of this official business that he needs to do. So it's a bit of a gray area in South Carolina law.
In terms of Governor Sanford's history, and as a political reporter in the state, is this unusual behavior for him? Has he gone AWOL in the past? I mean, one of the things that I think attracted everybody's attention nationwide to this is that it was Father's Day. He's got 4 young kids, and it just seemed like a strange choice for this particular weekend.
I can't speak for this particular weekend. I mean, he mentions his children in a lot of the speeches that he gives, and he references them often. As for his personality, he makes it very clear that he likes his solitary time. He has mentioned publicly many times that he's not a fan of having a security detail, and has said that he would get rid of it if he could. So whether he has been out of pocket like this before, we don't necessarily know all the occasions because he doesn't have a habit of publishing a public schedule. For instance, we do know a couple weeks ago there was a fire, a big wildfire in the Myrtle Beach area, and that the governor was overseas on a economic development trip that up until that point we didn't know that he was overseas. Nobody told us ahead of time that he was going on this trip, and so once the fire happened, he had to come back and deal with the emergency situation then.
What's the reaction to this in the state thus far? Is this a potential political issue for him, or at least some sort of awkwardness for him?
Yeah, it's a little all over the charts right now. You know, you have folks who range from being concerned about his well-being to attacking his irresponsibility, to folks who are making jokes about the situation and its kind of unbelievableness. Right now, I think it's really too early to say. I mean, we need to hear from the governor. We need to know where he was and what he was doing, and then maybe we'll know whether or not it'll be an issue down the road.
Well, to the extent that we know so little about what's happened thus far, other than the fact that he's been AWOL since Thursday, we have to hope and assume that he's doing well, and that he will check back in, if only because people are worried about him at this point. John O'Connor, political reporter for the state newspaper in Columbia, South Carolina, thanks for taking time to come on the show tonight.